Hello there, Cav P here. In this recent climate of social justice chic, it's very easy to think that progressive ways of thinking are finally here. Mainstream films like Mad Max Fury Road and Black Panther, for example, have made the status quo shit itself with its strong women protagonists stealing the show from the film's eponymous heroes to great acclaim. Progressive ideas in media have always been here, though, often before their time. Maybe they slipped right past our consciousness. They've often slipped past mine. Maybe they got lost in films that are otherwise not the poster examples for socially aware cinema, but in retrospect, we take a lot for granted. We spend a lot of time analysing the problematic aspects of the media we consume, as well we should. But it's also important to give credit where credit is due, and to acknowledge that many times what we believe to be commercially unwise has already been done successfully, or in the least, convincingly. I want to highlight these so that we stop making excuses for not taking risks in cinema to make it better and more representative of who we actually are and can be as a species. Welcome to Retroactive with Cav P. Just in time for the third John Wick film, today I'm going to talk about what the first John Wick and the video game Donkey Kong Country have in common. Bear with me. The damsel in distress trope in fiction has much crossover with the revenge film. An angry man takes violent action to avenge or retrieve the woman who has been taken from him, be it through abduction, trauma, or death. To this end, the genre is commonly reduced to an attempt to be edgy by brutalizing a woman or two at the beginning, especially to establish that a villain is in fact a villain. Let's look at some famous examples, shall we? In The Crow, our hero enacts systematic revenge on the gang of men who sexually violated and murdered his wife before killing him. Sans sexual violation, as you'd expect. Braveheart transplants the same premise to medieval Scotland. A woman's violation and execution at the hands of the enemy drives an otherwise peaceful retired soldier to righteous fury and kickstarts the plot. Women can be the heroes of these kinds of films as well, of course, but somehow they still have to be the victim that incites the story despite their leading role in the film. Rape revenge films like I Spit on Your Grave and The Last House on the Left make up a sizable portion of exploitation cinema, but the trope of young female victim as an inciting plot point appears in more mainstream and contemporary cinema as well. In Kill Bill, the story begins with the bride on the brink of death in a hospital with a pair of creepy men discussing her comatose body's use as a literal sex object.
And by the way, this little cunt's a spitter. It's a motor reflex thing. But spit or no punching.
That victimization is not what primarily drives the bride per se, but we still subject her to sexual violence in order to take the most pleasure in her revenge. Likewise, in Taken, Liam Neeson's character is portrayed as justified in his killings because his daughter has been abducted and is sent to a life of sexual slavery.
I will find you, and I will kill you.
This is something of which the male heroes of revenge films are seldom if ever victims, but for the women concerned, be she hero, family, or love interest, sexual violation, assault, or even just leery sexual intimidation is almost a given. The idea of woman as collateral doesn't just count for film either. Your typical action video game involves becoming a character who has to defeat enemies.
Can I kill you? Oh, I got killed.
And as the player wants to play the game already, and doesn't necessarily require the character to have explicit justification in order to embark on their fun killing or a defeating spree, these games are not often known for their nuanced character motivations. And because video games were traditionally seen as products for children and young people, there does not seem to be quite so much emphasis on brutalizing or murdering women to get the hero up off their butt and out into the fray, so much as constant abducting of women and calls to retrieve or otherwise protect them. The original arcade game, Donkey Kong, released in 1981, is one of the most popular arcade games of all time. It's also one of the earliest and most famous examples of a video game that uses a damsel in distress as a MacGuffin, i.e. the motivation for our protagonist to do what he does in the game. To those of you preparing to write in a huff in the comments, "But a MacGuffin is an object, not a person," do you honestly believe that the character of Lady, yes that was her original name, who does nothing in the course of the entire game but scream for help, has any other function besides that of an object? Can you even call her a character if she has no purpose outside of being a plot device? She's the object that instigates the plot, and the hero needs to collect the object to beat the game. Bam! There you go. I should probably point out at this stage that I'm trained as a sociolinguist, so words mean a great deal to me, and when you use word bad, I become disappointed in you. And I literally can't think of anything worse than that. Interested to see the results of this joke in the comments. Now that we've established this tired old trope, let's move on to John Wick. And I assume that if you've seen the film already, you're starting to see where I'm going with this. So, John Wick is not what you'd really call on the face of it a progressive film. Over the course of 101 minutes, Keanu Reeves kills no less than 76 people. That's almost 1 kill a minute, with only one named female character. A female character who arguably could have been cut entirely out of the film with no impact on story or character development, and who was pretty much a walking double entendre for most of the few scenes she was in. Yet, besides this, it does something that few other films of this nature can lay claim to regarding its treatment of women. Let me explain. Wick's wife dies at the beginning of the film, and the revenge that Wick reaps is related to her in a roundabout way. But you'll notice that she does not succumb to violence at the hands of those he seeks to kill. She dies of natural causes, and is replaced seamlessly by the puppy she bequeaths to Wick to help him find closure. Daisy, Wick's little beagle companion, is tragically killed within minutes of her introduction, but from the moment she's on screen, we're invested in her. She's an unlikely counterpart to Wick, bubbly and cute where he's calloused and gruff. But the affection shared between the two from the get-go is palpable, and how could it not be? Look at those little floppy ears. She also becomes a living representation of the all-encompassing love Wick shares with his nameless wife. She's a chance for closure, a chance to safely grieve, a lingering symbol of the simple married life Wick worked so hard to have. Far too soon, Daisy is taken from Wick and the audience, needlessly and brutally. It's so atypical to what we expect from movie tropes. Animals and children are all but invincible, that the moment is as shocking and painful to us as it is to Wick. We want justice, and Wick gives it to us with a satisfying crunch. If John Wick had used Wick's wife as the collateral in this revenge film, Wick wouldn't have reacted any differently, but arguably we probably would have. We're so used to seeing women being brutalized on screen, she would have been just another statistic, and an unsurprising one at that. Still sad, but nothing special. Just another day in the life of an on-screen woman. Yet Daisy's murder startles us. Somehow the murder of an animal is that much more taboo than the murder of a woman, the violation of a woman. In this film, the plot and Wick's passion for vengeance does not change one iota, but thanks to Daisy, the film is all the more memorable because of this twist on the genre. I'll certainly concede that in the grand scheme of the film's direction, the choice of a dog as Wick's object of affection could also be seen as a point of humor. But whatever the reason, it does make one think. Why do we need women to play these roles in the first place? If we can create a compelling and clever action-oriented film with a puppy as the crux of the plot, why do we not see more variety in films like these? So long as the core character motivation is there, why do we still think that abusing women is the only way to make that motivation believable? Why are 50% of the population used as collateral in a way that the other 50% are not? Furthermore, why does the violence committed against women in films so often need to be sexual for us to care? So, if Donkey Kong is such a good example of something I've made clear I find incredibly lazy, why have I called this essay What John Wick and Donkey Kong Country Have in Common? Well, aren't you impatient? In 1995, after two more fun arcade game incarnations of the Donkey Kong series, the Super Nintendo brought Donkey back yet again with an entirely new concept in the video game series Donkey Kong Country. It's heavily implied in the game's canon that the Donkey Kong in these games is in fact the grandson of the original, much more villainous Donkey Kong. In this game, Donkey is the protagonist of his own story, as he seeks revenge for a great wrong done upon him and his species-diverse family. Yes, again we have a revenge plot. Although, this game deftly, and most likely unwittingly, subverts the typical revenge plot trope by replacing the damsel from the game's first incarnation with a banana. That was all it took to convincingly give incentive for the protagonists to, go ape on the game's villains. The core mechanics of the story were unchanged. The villain of the game angers our heroes by destroying, defiling, and/or disappearing with something they love, and in response the heroes embark on a quest for vengeance, often violent, but almost always completely justified in the eyes of the players. The only difference in the case of Donkey Kong Country is that the loved one is an inanimate object, and just like in film, it doesn't need to be anything else. The character's drive in the story is completely sound and believable without needing to victimize a woman. It ends up being more creative, more charming, and much, much more memorable. Irrespective of the infinite number of things and people who could be used as motivation for video game protagonists for an infinite number of reasons, unfortunately, women are still one of the more popular placeholders, especially in legacy game series which may consider it difficult to break away from the canon MacGuffins of their early incarnations. Games like Super Mario, Zelda, Double Dragon, Resident Evil, Metal Gear, BioShock, Kingdom Hearts, Devil May Cry, Castlevania. You know what? Just look at Giant Bomb's huge collection of games which use the trope. I'm not going to be the person who says that including this trope means a game is automatically, irredeemably bad. What I am going to say is that to me it makes them just that little bit more boring, and for that reason, seeing subversions of the trope in video games like in Donkey Kong Country always gives me joy. We seem to have a smidgen more luck with this kind of thing in film than in games, though we could stand to see a lot more of it. John Wick is not alone among successful films with the subversion of women's pain as motivation, which makes the continued oversaturation of this boring trope all the less excusable. Look at Jean-Claude Van Damme's Pound of Flesh, with an angry man killing everyone who gets between him and his stolen kidney. Or there's Tony Jaa's Tom Yum-goong, the Protector in the US, because languages other than English are un-American, with an angry man killing everyone who gets between him and his stolen elephant. With the same mechanic in place, but without the victimization of a woman, you can have your cake and eat it too. And if anything, an otherwise generic film, game, novel, anything, only becomes more significant and memorable because of it. John Wick and Donkey Kong Country both show us that if a character loves something, anything, and it is torn away from them, that is motivation enough. I guess what I'm trying to say can be summed up thus. I want to see more bananas in fiction. What are some other examples of media you know of that subvert the damsel in distress trope in this way? I want to know and consume them. Please let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. I love talking about positive things in film and TV that surprise or excite me, and I want to continue this series. If you enjoyed it and want more, please like the video so I know there's demand. Validation does wonders for the motivation, you know. Well, until next time.